I'm expecting an earthquake, like the once in a lifetime magnitude earthquake. It's usually coming through, and I'm worried about California the most. But I'm not thinking it's off in Japan or in Sri Lanka or Thailand. There have been some earthquakes like Thailand. When we talk about other events, it's fire, right? We're already seeing Mars and Leo, and there's fires in New Jersey. Jerusalem is burning because the fires are burning there. So we're going to see more of that. And how big can those fires get? It's a really good question. Mars can cause fire, Mars can cause drought. 2025 is a passageway from one place to the other. It's not the destination. A lot of what happens in 2025, I still worry about Donald Trump's health. I've been talking about April and May for a long time. Hi, I'm Lori Lothian, and I'm an astrologer and a psychic. I've been doing this work for so many years now, back to when I was actually a very young child. And I'm really glad to be on the show today to talk about what I do, how I see the world, and what I think may be coming down the pipeline for the Earth and the world as well. Yeah, so I became an astrologer back in my 20s. I was working in New York City as a magazine editor, and I wanted to get a side job on top of my regular job. And this famous astrologer had died, and he was really well known back in I'm 63, so this is quite a long time ago. But I was living in New York City in the late 1980s, working in a magazine editing job, and this guy passed away before he finished his book. So back in that day, you would get these books every year in the supermarkets and the bookstores, like Leo, year ahead, the whole year, and then an Aries year ahead. Anyway, the guy died, and he actually had his wife trying to write them for him. He was a famous astrologer. I'm not going to say his name, so that his wife could still get the money. Like, oh, honey, you can write them for me. But anyway, the editors realized that the wife, and the guy's dead now, was just moving around all of the paragraphs from other books he'd already written, and nothing made sense. So they hired a new bunch of people, including me, to rewrite the books. And so I wrote Sagittarius, I think, and Gemini, for example, to fix the problem. But I only knew a little bit of astrology, and I decided I better learn it before I try to fix it. And that was how I really dove straight into astrology. I'd say I would have been about 28 years old. My Saturn return. It's a big thing in astrology. It's when you find some of your real calling in life, what you really want to do. So before I actually started doing the astrology full time, which is only full time since 2018, I had taken some time in my 30s to move away from magazine editing in New York City and doing more of a journalism job. I was a journalist, and I decided I would start doing psychic readings for people. I know that sounds like a crazy jump from one career to the other, but I was really good at it when I was helping my friends with tarot cards and stuff. But it turned into, in my 30s, first of all, a huge career for about 8 years doing remote viewing, doing being in a BBC documentary about my remote viewing. So I have to separate predictions that have come true from my just psychic readings time. And I also used to talk to dead people, and I was an evidential medium. I would tell people, like, this is your grandmother because her name is, she's got 6 cats and her name might be starting with an E. So I was pretty good at that job. But I have some favorite stories, really beautiful stories of what I remember most about that career in my 30s before I went to astrology. And one of them was very touching for me. This young woman sat down in my home in Annapolis, Maryland at that time. And I usually didn't see clients in person. I used to do pre-recorded tapes for people, but she lived in the same area. So she came into my home, and I was telling her about her future, and I was saying, and I see a baby boy, and I'd say she was about, to my eye at the time, maybe 30 years old, and I see a baby boy, and you're holding him in your arms, and it's a blue blanket. He'll be here within a year. And then suddenly she just starts sobbing and crying, and I'm like, oh, let me get some Kleenex, are you okay? And she says, no, I had surgery for uterine cancer, and I can't have children. And I'm like, because I said 1 year from this moment, she'll have a baby in her arms, and it's a boy. And I even said he looked just like her. Anyway, so I felt really bad. And so I went back in intuitively and listened and saw what I saw. And I said, it's not going away. I still see you with this baby in your arms within a year. And she said, we've tried to get on adoption list. It's a long wait. It certainly could happen. My husband and I, he was a state trooper, her husband, and but certainly not in a year. And we're not on any list yet. And I'm so sorry. I think you're wrong. So she left, and I could tell she was very upset when she left my reading at that time. And then a year later, like it was like a year later, she came back for another session with me. And I remembered her because I felt bad about it. And she has a photo album in her hands. And she said, I want to show you something. It always makes me cry every time I tell this story. She was a beautiful young woman and she wanted to have babies. And she opens up the photo album and she's holding a little boy in her arms with a blue blanket and literally looks just like her. And what happened before that, my reading to the time she came back a year later, was her mother's best friend's daughter got pregnant at like age 15. And because they were Catholic, would not keep the baby. The dad was black, the mother was white, and my client was Mediterranean, like an Italian. So the baby had the perfect complexion of an olive skinned child that with a dark hair, and she got the baby in her arms within a year. And she was so happy. And also another beautiful story. She kept the mother in the life of the baby as the auntie. And it was one of those times when I was thinking to myself, as a psychic, I better quit my job. Because I'll tell you, I really missed the mark with a woman who had no uterus at 30 having a baby of her own in her arms. But, I was just so touched by that story because it really moved me. And I kept doing that, really inspired me to keep doing the work I was doing. It was a real turning point for me in my 30s. And when it comes to astrology, that I've had many predictions come true using astrology for my clients, of course, but also for world events. For instance, the devil is in the details, as they say. For example, we're recording this, in May, and the Pope has passed away. And I was looking at a chart, and I recorded it about a week before the Pope died. I said, "Well, this looks like a death of a world figure, and the way this chart's lining up, it looks like the Pope might pass away in the near future, like within the next couple of weeks." And he did. The other time I got a big prediction right, I mean, there's a lot of little ones, but was before Donald Trump was nearly unalived. We can't say that A word is bad for YouTube. Before in July, on a stage, I had done a video about 10 days before, I'm thinking it was, and I said, this is a really rough time for Donald Trump, and somewhere around July 15th, he may face on his life. It's very dangerous for him then. And then, of course, that's what happened. And when Biden stepped down, it was predicted a couple of times by me, but when Biden chose not to run in the United States for office again, um, in March of 2024, I did a big reading on that and said that for health reasons, he would need to step down. So it's kind of fun, but sometimes I wonder what value it adds, because I really sometimes like to see something that shows people, something more important about their lives. And so I always laugh at my job, the astrological doomsayer. All right. So the Pope, I'm recording when they're doing the smokestacks and they haven't decided on a Pope yet. And there's a big question everyone has, who is the next Pope? I haven't looked at the astrology of it yet, but I have a hunch it's a dark complexion male. So psychically, I see somebody with darker skin. I don't even just mean Latin skin. So more of a like a black person or a really dark skinned man. Second of all, when I do the astrology investigation, which I'm behind, I should take a look. Ultimately, I don't think it's going to take them a long time to. I know that we all watch the conclave, but I think they'll be in consideration of the next pope no longer than 3 days. So I think we're on day one on May 7th. So by 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, Mercury moves into Taurus on May 10th. And when he does that, that's the perfect place for the announcement of a pope. So it'll probably, because the sun is in Taurus right now. So the announcement of the pope will likely take place closer to May 10th and May 9th in some time zones. I don't know. I just keep seeing someone with darker skin, but I'm not following it really. You see what I'm saying? So that's just psychically, I see some darker skin color. So 2025 is the end of the war in Ukraine, Russia. I already see that already happening, but it's easy to see why. And between, I'm recording in May, I don't think the war can last till maybe even July. That war will finish up. And the war in the Middle East is old. It's like tired and it's ready to leave its is getting ready to quit. That war is caused by eclipses. It's mirrored by eclipses. And so eclipses in 2023 on the ascendant of Israel started the war. And the last eclipse that impacts that war happened on March the 30th. That was a solar eclipse on March the 30th, 2025. And it connects to the war axis of Libra Aries, that is very much a story for Israel. Every 18 years, they get into another local war. And that will likely start to lose energy really quickly because it was a very complicated eclipse. It wasn't a pure eclipse. So normally a solar eclipse can roll out through about a year. I don't think this one will take until a year, which would be March of 26. I think by the time we reach the fall, it'll be over. I don't think it's going to be over in a way that people want it to be over. And maybe that's where some of the student protests and stuff are going to happen, like the Vietnam War, because it may look a lot like Israel's just going to annex. I've been saying this for months. I don't have I'm just telling you the astrology. I'm not telling you about my beliefs about the nation of Israel, but the nation of Israel is going to take over Gaza, likely the top half based on my intuition, and then push people down to Rafah or the Egyptian border. But there may be a huge outcry amongst the younger generations, the TikTok generations, and we may see some protests there as well. As where when it comes to the economy, yes, July, June, especially May, June, July, things start to get better at the end of July. But there's a huge square coming up in June between Saturn and Jupiter that tends to look like economic hardship. And it usually 9 out of 10 times causes stock market turbulence. There's going to be a better sky in the economy of the United States and therefore the world in 2026. 2025 is a passageway from one place to the other. It's not the destination. A lot of what happens in 2025 are people get sick and tired of war, of being told by powers that be what they should do. There's already been a movement around, not wanting to be dictated to by the populace, and even with the situation right now with the tariffs that's going on, though that will simmer down as well. But I see a lot of shift politically in the world towards trying to figure out what sovereignty looks like amongst, say, states or provinces. And that's Pluto and Aquarius. A lot of breakaway states, a lot of breakaway provinces. Taiwan and China will probably have, well, not they won't necessarily be breakaway states like this. The United States will have, California leave the nation. Not necessarily. Canada might have more of that going on with our provinces. But when Pluto's in Aquarius, historically, economic groups form in new ways. So, like the BRICS nations will get stronger, China will get stronger because Pluto and Aquarius is on China's ascendant. China will make an attempt to push its way toward Taiwan, I think, in late 2025, based on the astrology. However, I don't think it's going to work, and I think there'll be a civil or diplomatic solution. I don't think there'll be a war there. I still worry about Donald Trump's health. I've been talking about April and May for a long time being a challenge to his health. If he gets to the end of May or into early, by the end of May, early June, and he's fine, he'll probably be fine. But there are some situations in the sky that look difficult for his wellness. And so there's that too. But, if he makes it through to the end of May and he's still okay, then he's probably going to be fine. That's one of those more difficult ones to see. There's a lot of variables going on there for him. And lastly, a bigger story is JD Vance looks like he'll take over the presidency and the astrology before Trump is done his 4-year term. Now, Trump is an older man. I don't know why that could happen, but I've been seeing that in the charts of JD Vance and Trump. They have very similar skies, Leo rising and Taurus midheaven. And it looks like there's a move upwards for JD Vance 2 to 3 years into the presidential term for some reason. So there's that story as well. You asked about war. You asked about war. Tell me about war. Tell me about politics. It's going to be a hot summer. I don't know how hot, but there's something going on this summer where the long duration of Mars in Leo could lead to one of those really bad droughts or really bad heat waves or really bad wildfires worldwide in the summer on the northern hemisphere of 2025. So I'm looking at that as a problem as well. This too shall pass, but the way Mars is heating up the sky, he hasn't quite heated it up like this for many years. It goes back to 77, 78. And so hopefully it's not as bad as it could be, but Mars is going to be very hot this summer. Very hot. Yeah. Oh, which countries? Okay, so in 2025, yeah. I'm not following all the world's politics at this point, but if I look at 2025 and which countries may be in the news cycle the most, I certainly think it's going to be China. China has a very powerful transit of Pluto over the moon in its chart and the ascendant, and there may be major developments in that country connected to the land itself and connected to the people of China itself as well, not just the leaders of China. But the moon can represent also things to do with houses and real estate in China. And I have not enough knowledge of what they're doing over there, but Pluto crossing backwards over the moon could indicate some major Chinese stories going on about the nation itself, the people of China, and maybe something to do with, development of land and real estate, or maybe changes of policies as well for immigration or migration, etc. I kind of wonder too, I mean, because right now we see the Middle East calming down. Iran looks like it's going to be okay in terms of not having a bomb dropped on it by Israel or the United States via Israel or whatever. But there looks to me like with Iran and with Russia, both are Leo risings in different charts. The 1991 chart for Russia, that there is going to be a very hot time with Mars going through Leo through to about the second week of June, June 17th. So I'd say that right now, like May 7th to June 17th, there's a lot of tension with what's happening in Iran, a lot of tension with what's happening with Russia itself. But I do think that after we get through that and we get to mid-June, we're not going to see any major event going on with Iran and nuclear stories, because that's the biggest problem there, right? Dropping a bomb on nuclear production facilities and literally like a Chernobyl event. It will begin the news cycle. We'll see a lot of stories about that possibility. As much as we may not like some people, the personality of Donald Trump, he wants to see himself as a peacemaker. He wants to get that credit for on his resume. And so I think he's going to push and go around Israel astrologically. You can see how he could work with that country and make something happen. It is in the astrology, not my personal opinion, that he can align as a Leo rising with a Leo rising nation of Iran and find a solution. And that's the good news there for sure. I'm expecting an earthquake, like the once in a lifetime magnitude earthquake. It's usually coming through, for me, the sky says Uranus, Uranus on Algol. Uranus is in the sign of land, and Algol is about, mass death and calamity. And there's something about the way the rest of the chart lines up with that it's in the strong possibility, and I'm worried about California the most. But I'm not thinking it's off in Japan or in Sri Lanka or Thailand. There have been some earthquakes like Thailand, but it's not that. It's not 7.7 or 7.8. Unfortunately, I'm seeing some earthquake in the next 6 months. This is in May, we're recording, some earthquake calamity, possible massive earthquake, the kind of earthquake that is once in a lifetime that really brings people together, like the one in the 1920s in San Francisco. Now, when we talk about other events, it's fire, right? We're already seeing Mars and Leo, and there's fires in New Jersey. Jerusalem is burning because the fires are burning there. So we're going to see more of that. And how big can those fires get? It's a really good question. Mars can cause fire, Mars can cause drought. So droughts, fires, but then the earthquake story. Less flooding. I don't see that now. We had flooding before when Mars was busy doing stuff in Cancer. I really think the hardship that Mars brings through Leo is mostly about the heat. Leo is a sign of leaders and rulers. And so people in places of celebrity or power or rulership, and Mars is cutting, ending, severing, that can lead to the death of world leaders, any world leader. like hopefully King Charles is doing great on his cancer treatments, or the Pope was a leader of a high note. He did pass, and that was during Mars and Leo. So we will probably see through to mid-June more world leaders perishing and falling from the sky. And I want to say falling from the sky because the asteroid Icarus has been really busy in the heavens, and this is the boy whose wax wings melted when he rose to the heights of the sun. And it's like where you fall from high levels of power. One of the weird things about Icarus is it also sometimes looks like a helicopter going down or a plane. And during that massive rash of plane crashes that we had in earlier in the year, Icarus was really traveling close to the sun. Icarus could even be the Russian 53-year-old space probe that was meant to go to Venus, that's meant to crash in sometime in May, mid-May, or May 10th to May 15th, into our atmosphere. And it could land anywhere, a populated city. It's not going to break all the way up. And that's been in the news cycle for astronomers. And that's interesting because there's something falling from the sky, Icarus. So Icarus can be the falling of the sky power, death of world leaders, falling helicopters or planes. This is a sad story, but also, yeah, that space debris is coming down in May, and Icarus is sitting with the sun. That's on the moon we just had. So I predicted things falling from the sky off of our last lunation. So that's still here. That's still playing out. It's actually a good story because the universe is full of difficult stories. But before it gets good, it gets worse in some ways. We're going to maybe come into a tough summer, June and July, for things to do with stock markets and the economy in North America, in the United States in particular. And what goes on in the United States is usually going to impact the rest of the world. So the United States looks like probably from the tariffs, probably from Trump, that there's going to be a downturn, a significant downturn in the market this summer. It's most likely. Is it 100%? No. But the stock markets are very tied to a very big event in our sky with Jupiter in the sky and also Saturn. And the last time Jupiter and Saturn did this thing in the sky called a square, we had two market tumbles behind us in the last 6 months. And this one would be the bigger one. Okay, so we'll see. I hope not for a lot of people. So if you're invested, be careful. But the more important part of the sky that gets really beautiful and very mysterious is this beautiful triangle forming between Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus beginning in July. And it's going to kind of run through all the way till next year. And, to the end of 2026, very precise triangle. It's thousands of years rare. It may invite in an incredible new world in which we encounter non-human intelligence. And that's connected to the Uranus story in this chart, as well as to the Neptune Pluto in the heavens. And the way this all lines up, one of my biggest hope and my biggest intense desire for that triangle to bring blessings to the world is to bring us into contact with an intelligence that's either extraterrestrial or coming from interdimensional or time traveling. Any of these crazy stories, popular mechanics just came out with a story about the idea that teleportation is possible. I'm like, really? So because I'm bringing up the other part of it, this is also going to be a surge of crazy intensity around artificial intelligence and technology. My hunch is 2026, 2027, as well as meeting our space brethren or other dimensional intelligence beings. We're probably going to invent enough artificial intelligence. We're going to get it up and running, or quantum computing, where things that we want the answers to that our minds will never solve are given to us. How do we time travel? The computer figures it out. How ancient is civilization really? And the AI gets the right answer. Not yet. Quantum computing and AI together in the next 3 years, and as a part of that Neptune Uranus Pluto triangle that we are going to see in our sky. This is a time in our life where a lot of the sky in 2025 and a little bit in 26 replays like the Summer of Love, 1960s student protests and hate Ashbury against the Vietnam War. And we've been living in this repeat of 1967, 68, and we're still in it. So last year and this year. And I expect some surge of similarities to generational gaps this year. The young people saying stop the wars and the old people still running the wars. And that comes from the Saturn ingress into Aries. And that's going to take place again, a lot like 1968, because that's very similar sky. Like we're rinsing and repeating the same thing over again. That's difficult or good. It depends if the young people can get their voices heard and if the older generation can listen. The ones that have the power to create wars are mostly boomers, not all of them, but a lot of baby boomers like Donald Trump, before that Biden, that kind of thing. And in my country, Mark Carney, but Canada doesn't do wars, so we're pretty good. We just follow the leader. Um, that is that beautiful triangle coming into being that we haven't seen for so many thousands of years. I mean, I don't think any astrologers quite found it ever because you have to get so many exact things. But it's not Saturday, it's Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus in a perfect triangle. Starting in July, we're going to see it starting to show up for us, and then it continues to be in our sky pretty exact until about November 8th. But then it comes back again next year. So we're going to get 2 years, 2025, 24, with this mini grand trine with the major outer planets engaged in this, in the signs that belong to, right? They're in certain signs. Neptune will be in Aries and Uranus will be in Gemini and Pluto is in Aquarius. So we're going to see fire and air. And fire and air is like, yes, that can be fires, but the fire and air can also be transformation. Fire is the spirit, the soul, the real people we are, right? And the fire is getting a huge amount of blast from the air, independent of everything else, like transformations with quantum computing, AI, and meeting the aliens or space brothers. Those are all things that can happen. It's really going to sort of spark, just like lightning can spark, hypothetically a lightning bolt could spark life in a pond or in a muddy land. There's going to be some awakening during the next 2 years. I think the real intensity is next year. There's a flavor of it. Everyone is going to have a different experience of it. Some people will awaken spiritually, like literally start to talk to angels, if you feel their guides are around them, connect to deep synchronicity, understand their role in the cosmos. Other people might have a smaller awakenings, just for the very first time in their life, they thought they heard a ghost in the house, or for the first time in their life, they are suspicious of powers above them that tell them what to do, because this kind of triangle can also get people into more of a liberation around not being so gullible about what governments and authorities tell them. So there's that personal liberation, sovereignty, but there's also more deep spiritual true awakening that's available. I don't know if you know about the event wave, but back in the 19, back in 2018 and 19, a lot of people were waiting for some event. It would be like a wave that would flood over the earth and everybody would wake up. It's sort of like the rapture in the Bible. Well, I don't see that happening. What I do see happening is the energy of the sun changing dramatically. And that solar change is going to bring about different energies here, like literally, like I'm not a weather space person exactly, but the sun does emit radiation. It does have it is at a solar maximum, and there is a potential for some of those blasts of radiation from the sun to be a part of a kind of a feeling that we're restructuring. And the Schumann resonance as well is really having high amplitude spikes in the last 2 years. That's the mother's heart, Earth's heartbeat. So those cosmic events, the sun and the Earth's resonant energy field, are going to intensify and do some unexpected things. And I'll predict that in 2026, there's going to be a lot of news in the sky, like in the world, about what the sun is doing. But what'll be happening because of what the sun is doing is we're going to be waking up. Oh my gosh, because I'm learning this lesson I'm about to talk about. find the time in your life. I don't care if it's like before bed or you get up before you take the kids to school or before you turn on your computer or your emails or whatever else to just sit quietly. And I use a kind of like a sound machine that plays frequencies because it really calms me, right? Or you can get on YouTube and put Tibetan bells on, maybe light some incense. But the idea, it's so intense in our world right now. We have come to the intense polarization between countries and people and politics and and a huge, it's almost like there's such intensity but we can't really feel our own soul anymore. We can't really tune in. That's why I like channels like this one that I'm participating in, to get people to look at some of life's more deeper layers. And you can't do it with all of the noise. To hear the voice of God as I channel, you must listen with the ears of the soul. It's not an audio podcast. It's not me talking. It's you being quiet. And in the solitude and the quiet moment, a solitude because if the kids are screaming in underfoot, you're not going to get there, or your husband's talking, or your wife, find a space alone at least once a day. If you can, 5 minutes is enough. And the second thing about that is that in the book that I channeled, when you go enter into that stillness, the best you can, because we all have to learn to become more still, then you're also going to rejuvenate. And that's a really big, big, big story because we're tired, we're depleted, we're fatigued adrenally, we're overwhelmed. Some of us are going through hardships, but the still point of quiet, silent introspection, just call it that, the best you can do. Even if you're not listening to a podcast, that's the best thing, like just being quiet. It actually gives you a chance to be in the sort of receptive space. And the receptive space is like a wavelength of divine energy. And it literally can help you physically, emotionally, and mentally. You don't have to channel God. You just have to be in a receptive space. And we're not doing enough of that. We're receiving garbage. We're receiving bad news. We're receiving political news broadcasts. We're receiving anger from our friends and family. We need to be like receptive and still. And that's my advice for everyone. And I take it myself. I get up in the morning now at 6 a.m. to be quiet, 5 a.m. sometimes, and not do anything. Just be quiet for at least 10 to 15 minutes.